Salam, everybody, and greetings from my crew, and greetings for this holy season in this month of April. Welcome back to our next segment of looking at the reason why and the concepts of salvation in this holy month, where Muslims are going to be celebrating their Eid after a holy month of Ramadan, and Jews are going to be celebrating Passover, just like Christians are going to be celebrating Pascha and also Easter, which is basically the same thing, but they fall under different time of this month. Now, between around date 15th of this month, the Jews and the Western Rite or Western tradition Christians are going to be celebrating the Passover and Easter, respectively. Around 24th of this month, the Eastern Rite Christianity is going to be celebrating their Pascha or Easter, and some few days after, the Muslims are going to be celebrating Eid after a holy month of Ramadan. And so this is a very special month, like I said in the other few segments before this, and very important and very significant to the world in terms of world peace, world unity, and also shared vision of humanity and purpose. And so we're going to continue with our themes that are going to lead us to that. Hopefully, we will be able to finish on time when this season will be actually coming to an end. And so we continue with our themes, and this time I want us to look at the prediction of Passion of Christ. This was predicted, and it was a very difficult thing for the apostles to understand. And even after Peter confessed, it was still very difficult for them to understand and believe. And so we continue to look at this from the synoptics, but of course, like I said when we were introducing this, I am going to be biased towards the book of Mach, because I am an African Christian, and I'm going to base my themes according to how Mach, an African apostle, did, and the first African bishop of African Christianity, did. And so this prediction it comes in a very queer way, because Jesus began speaking about his death. And so this suffering servant was not a very favorable theme of the Messiah among the Jews. And this may be one of the reasons why Jesus was rejected, because for them they expected somebody with the earthly glory like David and probably Solomon, who will conquer them, conquer the Romans, and free them like the former kings did. And especially, it is very important to remember that the Messiah was to come from the house of David, and so it was a kingship house. And so he teaches them, he demonstrates them to them, but they really don't get it. I understand. It is not easy. And so Peter protests, according to Mark chapter 8. He really protests. Why should he suffer? Why should he die? And so Other writers of the gospel do not capture this, but Mark captures this very well. And like it is said by many traditions that Mark was recording what Peter told him, because Mark was educated and Peter wasn't, and so he knew how to write anyway. And so when you go to Mark 9, you will see that they did not understand. Even though they were listening to him, they did not understand. And especially the taste of death was so bitter for them to understand. And they could not understand how death will bring a kingdom. And so this is very important and very unique for us to understand. And so they really started doubting Jesus, and though they had already left a lot, so going back again, and you're not sure whether if you leave this guy, you're going to go back to your normal life or you will end up losing. And so they decided to go full circle with the mission. And so you will see that Luke, in writing the Acts of the Apostles, he captures this kingdom in a very very enjoyable way for the early Christians, because actually it only made sense after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so when in Acts chapter 2 he talks about the emperor's household, and so it only came to be understood that the household was the church. This was the household of Jesus. And of course, you read Philippians 4, you will get this concept of the household of God. And I think this is why in 1910, European Christianity sat down at Edinburgh and they decided to come up with the World Council of Churches, because they also realized then it is not about a competition of Christian traditions, as it were, but it is about going to the ends of the world and preaching the gospel and bringing salvation to the very many. And so this was the really great commission being realized by the church very much late after spending 1 million plus years in competition, in fighting, in it was so unfair. And for me, the revelation of the ecumene, the household, was there, even though the church was not united, and it was separated by politics, because they were depending on politicians, the emperors. And so they could not see it as a unifier. The only politician who saw Christianity as a unifier was Constantine. But then again, most of the bishops and people feel influenced back then started seeing differences other than similarities that will bring people into the house of God. And that's why you have a lot of debates about the Orthodox against the Roman Catholics, and then the Roman Catholics against the Orthodox, and again the Protestants, and later, even in our lifetime, the Roman Catholics against the Pentecostals and the Evangelicals, and so on and so forth. And so it is about the household of God. And so Mark, Luke, and Matthew do not mention the protest of Peter. I guess Peter told Mark he himself, but there is no any other witness of him. But in Matthew, Jesus rebukes Peter. So Peter does not protest. He protests, but Jesus rebukes Peter. And so our next theme will be the Holy Transfiguration in Mark 9. and Mark 9, we are going to look at the significance of transfiguration and in relation to Moses. When Moses went to Mount Sinai, which later changed name in the time of Jesus, it was very significant because this is the first recording of the transfiguration when he was coming with the 10 commandments. He was descending from the mountain. And though a lot of people have argued that there are no mountains in Israel, and so it is understood according to probably the exposure of the Old Testament, they did not have the privilege of probably looking at the Mount Everest, getting the privilege of probably knowing about Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya and other mountains that we know today. And so we'll just take it as it is. So Mount Tiber, which is most of the time thought to be Mount Hermon, because there are no any other mountain around this area of Caesarea Philippi, because that is the only mountain, and it is 14 miles north of Caesarea Philippi. And this is where Christ moved to from the Galilean ministry. And so this is where he reveals his full glory. And this is where his divinity comes out so clearly. The Holy Transfiguration brought out his divineness. And well, it's a matter of scholastic argument whether Moses and Elijah were there, and whether Christ was dazzling. I mean, these debates left for the theological classrooms. But the Bible tells us that the transfiguration was the dazzling and the brightness of Jesus' face and clothes. Though you will see Luke does not bring out the dazzling face of Jesus, and it does not bring out the presence of Elijah and Moses, though he brings it as an image, and he does not bring out the dazzlingness, but he brings out the fading of Moses and Elijah. But Jesus remains the same, but he does not dispute the presence. But a lot of people have really argued, because the apostles have different reading in the gospel for this incident. But that is not what we are here for. What we are here for is that Christ revealed his divinity. And so if you look, you remember the history of the Old Testament during the Exodus. There was this cloud, special cloud, that was called Shekinah in Hebrew. And it was a mark of the favor of God and the guidance of God. And so you are marked for as people with covenant with God. And so in understanding that, it is against the backdrop of this traditional understanding that the question of a dying Messiah was unfathomable. And so Moses never tasted death. He's the only figure that is claimed to have seen God. Elijah never tasted death. The only figure that was carried to heaven in a chariot of fire. And of course, there is one son of Adam, I don't know whether it's Enosh, who never tasted death as well. And so John the Baptist is seen in the New and Old Testament. And again, he's seen by that virtue of being in the Old Testament and the New Testament at the same time, as the person who brings the prophecy, and especially those who never tasted death. And he comes in the New Testament and he is beheaded. And so he tasted death to allow Jesus to become the only and the last person who will never taste death, who will taste death and who will resurrect. Because without doing that, I don't know now what happens to Enosh, but this was to give way for the Messiah to be able to rise from the dead and bring this very important and special revelation of salvation as liberation. And so this Mount Sinai in Exodus 24 and the tents in Exodus 13, the meeting point where the cloud was always there in Exodus 40, resonates very well with Acts chapter 1 and the ascension of Christ, because the cloud now has to go back, and it went back with Jesus. And so if you are able to follow this mark of salvation, the climax is in Acts chapter 1 when Christ is now taken up. During the Transfiguration, there is a voice, of course, like it was during the baptism of Jesus, and this is very much echoed and very significant, reading from Isaiah 42 in the servant song. And so the servant Messiah, or the servant King, and so it was there, but since the Jews only read up to chapter 40, Isaiah chapter 40, they missed this. And so the liberation prophecy, as it were during the time of Moses and during the time of Elijah, and of course Elisha and other prophets, continued with Jesus. And Jesus became the fulfillment and the reassurance of this is the direction and this is where we are, as far as that narrative is concerned. And so all these people who were in the Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah, people who were connected to the mountain. And it is believed that Mount Sinai, where the Transfiguration first occurred with Moses, was named Mount Horeb when Elijah lived in this time and space. And it is probably the same mountain we are talking about as Mount Tabor or Mount Hermon. And so Jesus had taken Peter, John, and James with him, but it is really not so important. But they asked him about the coming of the two prophets, and Jesus answers that they have already come. So, and this is why I was taking you back and telling you it is not important for us to really debate this. This is left for theologians to do that in class. But there is somehow the spiritual aspect of it, and other than the physical justification of it. Just like it happened with Paul when he was called and he saw a light. He's the only one who saw it during baptism. At least it is recorded. And so probably the voice was heard and the Spirit descended like a dove. So a lot of people have been shown that a dove descending, but I don't think it is a dove physically descended. So this is a spiritual matter, and you can only be a preview of it when you are very much immersed. And so we look at the martyrdom of John, like I said, representing now the fulfillment of people who are of all creation facing death. so that Jesus can be able to liberate them. And so it is very significant that Moses and Elijah were represented by John the Baptist as the last prophet. Jesus was also a prophet, but he was a fulfillment of the prophecy. So the apostles are still puzzled with the idea of a suffering Messiah. And so we will just forgive them and forgive all the people who were involved in killing of Jesus, but they had to do that. So, and they were all forgiven, for your information. And so we are going to look in the next segment. We're going to look at another theme of the Jesus warning the people of his death. This is another prediction, but I want us to summarize on this transfiguration. It is not the first one to be recorded among the Gentiles. The Greeks and the Romans had their own versions, and so Dr. Luke is very careful not to bring out the transfiguration because he's writing to the Romans and the Greeks, and so he never wanted them to read from their own tradition and think that they were in the right direction, and so he does not bring it out as the other gospel writers do, but he concentrates more on the prayer. And so this is largely his theme, prayer. And so, and the international or universal messianic nature of Jesus. And so the coming death of Jesus, again, like I say, it is a bitter pill for even the early church to swallow among the Jews. And so when Jesus starts talking about his death, you will see the fear and the lack of hope among the Jews. And this is why Peter becomes a victim. The person who reveals Jesus becomes the first and the very prominent person to doubt Jesus. And so thank you so much. We shall continue to speak on this in our next segment. And so remember, we are doing all this so that we can understand our roots and bear good fruits. In this holy month, please remember to be humble, to be kind, and to love one another. It's all about the unity of humanity under God, not about you being a member of a certain tradition that you think is better than the other. It's not about a competition, but a complement. Thank you so much, and much blessing.